game, man. What's up, Chingu? Today we're going to be making kimchi jjigae. If you've never had kimchi before, or if you were a little hesitant to try it, then this is probably the best gateway dish for you guys to fall in love with kimchi. It's just something about well-fermented kimchi and fatty pork belly that's just... This is going to be a super easy dish, so let's get started. First, we have to make a stock. It does take more time, but trust me, it's going to add a lot more flavor than water and you'll be glad you made it. You can buy this pre-packaged one, but I'll show you how to make it from scratch. All you need for a base broth is a piece of kelp and 4 cups of water. But that's kind of basic, so we're gonna amp it up a little bit by adding 6 dried anchovies and some Korean radish. Start peeling your radish and cut them into super thin strips. The reason for the thin strips is because it exposes a lot more surface area, thus you can extract a lot more flavor this way as opposed to leaving it whole. Next are anchovies. Dried anchovies come in different sizes, so make sure you guys grab the big ones. These smaller ones I'm showing you here are typically used for stir fries. Anytime a recipe is calling for dried anchovies for stock, it's always going to be the big one. I'll show you what you can do with the small ones another time. Now we gotta do some dirty work. Start by removing the heads on all the anchovies very carefully. Next, open up the underside of the anchovy and remove all that black substance, making sure not to remove anything else. The guts are edible, but they do impart a very unpleasant bitterness to your food. So unless you want your stock to taste like bitter shit, really take the time to carefully remove the guts so that your final stock tastes nice and clean. Once you prepped out the ingredients you need for stock, throw it all into the pot and bring it to a boil. As soon as your stock comes up to a boil, bring it down to a low simmer and simmer for 20 minutes. Make sure not to cover this with the lid so that any fishy smells get removed while it's simmering. After 20 minutes, drain the stock completely, ensuring you get every last drop of that liquid gold. We'll only be needing about half of what we made today, so any leftover you have, make sure to freeze it, or you can keep it in your fridge for a couple of days. Now it's time to prep our ingredients for the kimchi jjigae. All the ingredients will be listed down below so I can make this video a little shorter. First up is our onion, so take off the root, the top, and then cut it in half. Then, using the tip of your knife, cut along the outline of the root to completely remove it without wasting any of the onion itself. Do this for both sides, peel your onion, and make sure to clean up once you're done. Always remember to clean up as you go, as it'll make cleaning a lot quicker. Now, as you're watching me cut these onions, we're going to talk a little bit about knife cuts. A very big advantage of having good knife skills is for consistency. See how I'm cutting these onions? They're 2 different sizes, but each half is consistently the same size. It's very important to follow a recipe, but there are times when you just think about why an ingredient is being cut a certain way, then sometimes you can be flexible. The size of an ingredient is going to determine how fast or slow it cooks, the texture and the mouthfeel, the presentation, and so many other things. Everybody's skill set starts somewhere different. Whether your cuts are looking a little rough right now, or maybe you're just a badass and you have really good knife cuts already. Make every cut the same size to the best of your ability. Think of every cut that you make with a knife as a rep, kind of like push-ups. The more consistently you practice consistent knife cuts, the quicker you're going to improve. One great way to practice is with these green onions. Take half of the green onions and cut it into whatever size you want. Just make sure that they're consistent. Here's another one. Angle your knife at 45-degree angle and do the same thing. I use a lot of green onions in my recipes, so they're just a great resource to use to practice. Once you've completed that, congrats! Now you've just unlocked a new knife skill that you can use on pretty much any other ingredient. Next, peel and mince your garlic. You don't have to cut it as finely as I did here, but if you do leave like chunks of it, then you're gonna bite into chunks of garlic in your stew, which isn't bad, but not what we want. Next, grab your tofu and cut it into consistent size squares. Pork belly is my primary protein in this recipe, but if your dietary needs don't let you eat pork, then replace it with tofu. It's a great source of protein, it tastes delicious in stews, and best of all, it's pretty cheap. Next, we're going to cut our pork belly. We want to cut our pork belly into nice, thick cubes. I guarantee you, if you cut these too small or too thin, it's not going to be the same. You want each piece of pork belly to be big enough for one good bite. Think about when you cut a steak. Do you cut off a small thin piece or a thick, meaty, juicy piece? Cut it too small and it's just not going to be as satisfying as a big, thick, juicy piece of meat in your mouth. We're going to be simmering the pork for quite a while in this recipe, so by cutting it too thin, it'll dry out too fast for that duration of time. So by cutting it thick, it'll stay nice and juicy. Next, we have to cut the star of the show, the kimchi. But not on the cutting board directly, it's going to stain the board. I learned this trick on TikTok from Chef Chris. Put all your kimchi into the bowl, grab a pair of kitchen scissors and start cutting your kimchi into small bite-sized pieces. Now you don't have to go through the trouble of cleaning and washing your board with kimchi stains, and trust me, it's not very fun. You need bleach to clean it. This next step is kind of sort of optional. My kimchi was a little too wet, so I actually strained out a lot of the kimchi juice. The reason why is because the kimchi is going to be the first ingredient that's going to get cooked, and if there's too much liquid in there, then it's going to end up boiling as opposed to sweating like I intend to. Now that we're done with the kimchi, we are all set and ready with our mise en place for the stew. One of the foundations of speed in the kitchen is good mise en place. Now for the pot we're going to be using, I'm going to use a traditional earthenware pot called a Guk-ganjang. If you don't have one, it's fine, just use a regular pot. Get your pot to a medium-high heat and add a little bit of oil, about maybe a tablespoon. I know we're using pork belly in this recipe, but the kimchi is going in first and I needed some oil. If you're really that anal about it, then you can omit the oil, or maybe you can start stir frying your pork belly, but there's a reason why I'm not doing that, so I'll get to that in a minute. Slowly start sweating your kimchi. Now I'm sure some of you are wondering, when do I know when it's done? Well, this is when it's raw, so keep going. And continuously stir, because there is going to be moisture that comes out of the kimchi and you want that to evaporate. By removing water from the kimchi, you're concentrating its flavors, making it more kimchi-y. Now visually you can tell that this is not ready, but give it a taste. I want you to know what it's like. Now this piece is ready. It's translucent, it's soft, and its flavor is going to be incredible. Once your kimchi is ready, grab your onions, green onions, and garlic and add it to the pot. Give it a quick stir, then add in the reserved kimchi juice. Next is our chunky pieces of pork belly. Then fill the pot with the stock we made earlier, just until it barely covers the meat. Searing the pork belly would make the meat a little too dry. Simmering the pork belly will retain a lot of the fat, keeping our belly nice and moist. We like it moist. Next, throw in a tablespoon of the coarse pepper flakes, followed by the fine pepper flakes. Then add your tablespoon of Guk-ganjang or soup soy sauce. And you know what? I've come to a realization during the editing process, just watching myself struggle during this part. Add all the ingredients before you add the stock. Don't struggle like me. Once you mixed everything thoroughly, lower your heat down to a very low simmer, as low as your heat can go. Then simmer it with the lid on for about 30 minutes. Once the 30 minutes are up, then we're gonna grab our tofu and place them right on top. Continue cooking at a low simmer with the lid on for about 5 minutes, just enough for the tofu to get hot. Once the tofu's hot and cooked all the way through, all that's left is for us to garnish it with our green onions. Our kimchi jjigae or kimchi stew is finally done and it's ready to be served. Alright, well, so there you have it, kimchi jjigae. Not too hard, right? Alright, let's start by trying a little bit of the soup. Oh, man, I sound like an old Korean man. That's the stereotypical sound that middle-aged Korean men will make whenever they eat something good or drink something refreshing. Gotta make myself an ideal bite. A little bit of everything. I'm literally only doing this so that more people watch this video. I don't eat like this at all. I don't really give a shit how it looks like on my spoon. Damn, look at that. It's not focusing. There we go. Look at that. Oh yeah, it's nice and fatty. Alright, 잘 먹겠습니다. It's important to leave that fat on there. I understand if for health reasons. You want to trim off some of the fat from the pork belly, but it's not worth it. Health isn't worth it. All jokes aside though, the fattiness of the pork belly really balances out all that sour kimchi. It's just, that's really what makes this dish in my opinion. I can't see myself eating kimchi jjigae without pork in it. It has to be pork in my opinion. I actually wasn't a fan of kimchi, believe it or not, being Korean. But kimchi jjigae is actually what got me to like it. Cooked kimchi is just so much more different than raw kimchi. And I learned to love raw kimchi too, but it's just a whole nother level of flavor. Like, I don't think anything in this world tastes like cooked kimchi. The next time you guys are at Korean barbecue, right after you guys grill the pork belly, grill the kimchi right after, right on that fat. Oh my God, it's so freaking good. As nostalgic as this is for me and as much as it reminds me of my grandma's kimchi jjigae, it doesn't taste the same. Don't get me wrong, it's still delicious. It's just that Koreans have this phrase called 손맛. 손맛 literally translates to taste of hand, and it refers to when a specific person makes a dish. Like, you can tell the difference between my kimchi jjigae and then my grandma's kimchi jjigae. Man, I know I'm a good cook, but I don't come close when it comes to grandma. Grandma has me beat. Yeah, technique, knife cuts, and just knowledge of cooking really comes into play here. But as cliche as this sounds, I think my grandma's was more delicious because of all the love that she put into the food. No, I know it sounds a little like mushy and whatever. But really though, my grandma was my main caretaker when I got back home from school and my mom was at work. She cooked for me to care for me, to nurture me, to make sure that I was well fed and I went to sleep on a full stomach. You know, I could really taste all the effort and love that she put into her food. Kimchi jjigae is always gonna have a special place in my heart, just because of how often I ate it and just how delicious I remember my grandma's kimchi jjigae always was to me. Anyway guys, that's the end of the video. I really hope you guys enjoyed this week's recipe. Let me know what you guys want to see next, and as always, 잘 먹어.